The system was never designed for you. Not really. It was designed for people who follow instructions well, absorb what they're given, perform on schedule, and graduate into whatever role was already waiting. You didn't fit that shape. Maybe you tried to for a while. Maybe you sat in rooms of structured learning wondering why nothing being taught felt like it was built for how your mind actually worked. Eventually, most people like you stop trying to fit and start building instead. Building knowledge, building capability, building a way of thinking that nobody assigned and nobody can take back once it's yours. Plutarch wrote something centuries ago that never quite lost its edge. The mind is not a vessel to be filled, but a fire to be kindled. The self-taught man didn't wait for someone to fill him. He found his own spark and learned to keep it burning without institutional permission. 6 reasons why that process produces something almost impossible to defeat. Each one explaining what the self-taught man carries that most people simply never build. Don't skip any part of this video. Somewhere in these 6 is a precise description of something you've already become. Something you've been carrying for years without ever having the exact language to explain it. Number 1. The system built followers. You built yourself. You've spent real time inside a structure that rewarded your ability to produce the correct answer on schedule, not your ability to question whether the question itself was worth asking in the first place. That distinction is nearly the whole gap between the thinking formal education typically produces and the thinking the self-taught man develops across years of operating without institutional permission. Formal education, at its genuine best, is a remarkable human achievement. It transmits accumulated knowledge across generations and opens doors to disciplines people might never have discovered independently. But it also operates under a constraint that rarely gets stated directly. It's designed to serve the average learner, at the average pace, toward outcomes defined before any individual arrived. For the person whose curiosity runs differently, who needs to go considerably deeper, when the curriculum insists on moving forward, the structure doesn't fully serve them. It contains them. The self-taught man discovered this through the persistent frustration of watching his actual intellectual hunger go consistently unmet by material he was supposed to be grateful for. Rather than deciding his hunger was the problem, he went looking for what he actually needed, outside the place that was supposed to provide it. That sounds like a small decision. Across years, it becomes the most consequential one a person makes about their own thinking. Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote in Self-Reliance that, to believe your own thought, to believe that what is true for you in your private heart is true for all men, that is genius. He was describing the experience of trusting your own sense of what matters enough to pursue it without external validation, which is exactly what genuine self-directed learning demands. The formal system never trains this. It trains deference to its own judgment about what's worth knowing and in what order. Think about what years of genuine self-direction actually require. Deciding without a syllabus what to study next. Determining when understanding is deep enough to move forward without a grade confirming it. Navigating long stretches where progress is invisible and provides no external evidence that anything useful is happening. That experience builds something formal education rarely has to develop. The capacity to keep moving toward understanding, even when nobody is watching, nobody is evaluating, and nobody is confirming that the direction makes sense yet. In a real professional setting, this difference surfaces quickly. A formally trained person brings a toolkit they were handed. Frameworks from coursework, methodologies their institution endorsed, genuinely useful, but also somewhat dependent on the problem fitting the toolkit. A self-taught person brings something different. Deep familiarity with operating past the edge of what they know, without an approved guide, having to think through what comes next rather than retrieve it from somewhere already mapped. Niccolo Machiavelli, observed that men who build their own capability through genuine effort hold what they've built far more securely than those who arrive through fortune or someone else's design. Because building something by hand produces a structural understanding that easy acquisition simply never generates. The system intended to produce competent graduates, what it accidentally created in the people it couldn't fully absorb, was something it never put on any curriculum: the capacity to self-construct. And that capacity, once genuinely built, is considerably harder to compete with than anything the curriculum was ever designed to deliver. Number 2, you learned how to learn without anyone teaching you that part. You've probably been in a conversation where someone asked how you figured something out, and you had trouble explaining it because the honest answer involved obsessive curiosity, repeated failure, and a process that followed no particular order and wouldn't fit cleanly inside any methodology someone might name. That difficulty explaining it isn't a weakness in your thinking. It's evidence of exactly how deep the thinking actually goes. Most formal education teaches what? Facts, frameworks, established principles, accepted methods. What it almost never explicitly teaches is how to evaluate a source you've never encountered before, how to notice when an argument is circular, how to sit with something that doesn't add up until you can identify specifically what's wrong with it. These meta skills tend to be assumed rather than deliberately taught. The people who emerge with genuinely sharp critical thinking almost always developed it through something outside the approved process, through reading they chose independently, through arguments they had to navigate without a teacher refereeing, through the experience of being wrong and having to figure out entirely alone exactly where the error was. The self-taught man develops this skill not as a byproduct, but as the entire process. Because when you're learning without a teacher, you are the teacher. And the teacher has to constantly evaluate the quality of the material, the reliability of the source, and the soundness of the conclusion before accepting it. Nobody else is performing that quality control. The self-taught man builds his filter from scratch, learns to trust it slowly, and refines it through the specific experience of applying it incorrectly and noticing the result. Bertrand Russell argued that what most people received under the name of education was closer to instruction, a process of filling in approved content without ever developing a capacity to evaluate whether the content was sound. The good life, he wrote, is one inspired by love and guided by knowledge, the evaluative kind, not the absorbed kind. The self-taught man builds exactly this by necessity, because no one else is doing it for him. This shows up most visibly in how self-taught people handle contradictory information. In a structured curriculum, contradiction tends to get resolved for you. The approved source wins, the instructor adjudicates. For the self-taught man, encountering two conflicting accounts means he has to evaluate them himself. That process, repeated across years of independent learning, produces a relationship with complexity that most formally trained people develop much later in their careers, if at all. Niccolò Machiavelli understood that the strategist who could evaluate situations without the distortion of received wisdom held a permanent advantage over one who simply operated from approved frameworks. There's also something worth examining about how the self-taught man relates to the edges of his own knowledge. Formal training presents knowledge as relatively complete within its scope. The self-taught man carries a far more accurate sense of exactly where his knowledge ends. A person who knows precisely what they don't know is better positioned to learn it than someone who carries vague confidence their training already covered the ground. Number 3, failure didn't break you. It became your education. You failed at something you genuinely cared about, not academically, not theoretically, but in a real, costly, personally significant way. And nobody was there to explain what went wrong, assign partial credit, or tell you how long you needed to process it before moving forward. You just had to sit with it, work out what happened, and decide, on your own authority, to continue anyway. That experience, failure without institutional cushion, without managed feedback, without a system absorbing the cost and returning you to the track, is one of the most formative things the self-taught man accumulates. Not because failure is enjoyable, because the specific kind of failure that arrives when you're operating entirely under your own authority, and the specific recovery that follows, builds something no other process quite replicates. In formal education, failure is managed. A poor grade has consequences, but also buffers, retakes, the simple fact that the failing grade exists inside a continuing structure. For the self-taught man pursuing something on his own terms, failure doesn't arrive in that form. If an approach isn't working, nobody redesigns the curriculum to correct it. If a project collapses, no safety net absorbs the fall. He falls, assesses the damage honestly, and decides, without anyone telling him he should, to begin again. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote something that has been repeated so often it risks losing its actual force. What does not kill me makes me stronger. Stripped of its casual usage, what Nietzsche was identifying is a specific process. The encounter with genuine difficulty, the kind that could actually end things, not merely slow them down, and the survival of it produces a structural change in how a person relates to difficulty afterwards. A recalibrated sense of what's actually survivable, derived from actual evidence rather than untested assumption. The self-taught man accumulates that evidence in a way most people don't. Every time he failed, without a system to catch him, and returned to work anyway, he expanded his demonstrated range of what he can survive. Not theoretically, actually, and that demonstrated range changes how he enters risk the next time. He's more accurate about consequences because he's lived through enough of them to know the difference between what feels catastrophic and what actually is. Aristotle argued in the Nicomachean Ethics that virtues are built through repeated practice, that courage develops not by reading about it, but by doing courageous things repeatedly until the disposition becomes a natural orientation. We are what we repeatedly do, he wrote, and what the self-taught man has repeatedly done is face genuine failure without a net and choose to continue. That repetition produces resilience as a structural feature, rather than an occasional performance. Repeated self-managed failure also produces a specific kind of humility, a genuine resistance to premature certainty. And precision about your own knowledge, knowing exactly what you actually know versus what you merely believe, is one of the rarest and most practically useful forms of intelligence available. Number 4. Nobody handed you your knowledge, so nobody can take it back. Think for a moment about everything you actually know. Not the credentials, not the titles, just the knowledge and capability sitting inside you right now. Where did it come from? Not the broad answer, the specific one. The particular question that started you down a given path, the particular struggle it took to work through it, the particular moment where something clicked that had been unclear for months. For most self-taught people, that answer is detailed in a way that formally trained people's answers rarely are. Because the self-taught man didn't absorb knowledge from an approved source, he assembled it, piece by piece, from directions he chose, through processes entirely under his own control. And that assembly, done by hand over years, produces a form of ownership over what he knows that borrowed knowledge simply doesn't carry. John Dewey argued that genuine learning was inseparable from experience, that knowledge absorbed without the context of a relevant problem was fundamentally different in quality from knowledge earned through actual engagement with that problem. We do not learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience, he wrote, placing the emphasis on what the learner does with experience afterward. The self-taught man, by necessity, is a reflective learner. There's no one else to perform that reflection on his behalf. When you learn something through months of trying, failing, adjusting, and finally understanding, that understanding belongs to you differently than understanding delivered through a lecture and retained for an exam. It's embedded differently in your thinking. It connects to more things. It's accessible under more kinds of pressure. And critically, it cannot be revoked. Nobody gave it to you, so nobody can recall it. No credential expiration, no shift in official consensus, no change in who holds institutional authority removes what you built from direct experience. This becomes especially visible in environments where knowledge structures shift rapidly. Industries change. Technology renders certain credentials partially obsolete. A person whose knowledge is primarily institutional can find themselves in genuine uncertainty about where they stand. The self-taught person experiences those shifts differently. His knowledge was already built outside official structures. The revision of those structures doesn't hollow out what he knows the same way. Think about what this looked like during rapid technological transitions across various industries. The people who navigated those transitions most effectively weren't always the ones with the deepest formal training in old methods. They were often the ones who had already developed the habit of learning outside approved frameworks, because that habit transferred directly into new territory. The self-taught man is structurally the more portable person. His knowledge travels with him in the most complete form available, built directly into how he thinks, not just filed under what he knows. Number 5. You stopped waiting for permission so long ago, you forgot you ever asked. At some point in your life, you wanted to do something, learn something, build something, pursue something that felt genuinely worth pursuing, and you waited briefly for someone to confirm it was acceptable. When that permission didn't arrive quickly enough, or at all, you just did it anyway. That moment, the shift from waiting for permission to simply starting, is one of the most consequential changes in orientation a person can undergo. And the self-taught man typically went through it years before most people around him, often without recognizing it as the significant crossing it was. Most people operate under a permission structure they've never consciously examined. The belief, absorbed early and reinforced consistently, that certain kinds of action require someone else's approval before they're legitimate. A credential before the knowledge is applied, a title before the authority is exercised, a course before the skill is practiced. This structure makes sense in contexts where shared standards and collective coordination genuinely matter. But it becomes a serious problem the moment it applies to things that don't actually require permission. To learning, to creating, to building, to simply deciding that something is worth pursuing and beginning today, rather than after the appropriate gate has been cleared. William James observed that act as if what you do makes a difference, it does. The self-taught man applied something structurally similar long before he might have read James. He acted as if his learning mattered before anyone confirmed it did, produced before anyone acknowledged the production was legitimate, built capability before anyone certified the building was sound. That pattern, once established, becomes a cognitive default. The question stops being, is this approved, and becomes, is this worth doing? That single shift changes almost everything about what a person ends up pursuing across a life. Think about what the permission structure costs the people who remain fully inside it. Years spent preparing to do something rather than doing it, because the preparation isn't yet officially complete. Projects never started because the credentials haven't arrived. Directions never pursued because no one with authority has confirmed they're worth exploring. All of that is genuine opportunity cost, real potential spent waiting at a gate that, for many of the most worthwhile things a person might do, was never actually locked. The self-taught man finds out the gate was open by trying to walk through it. He doesn't spend years calculating whether it's locked. He arrives, pushes, and discovers the answer experientially. That approach produces failures. Some things tried before adequate preparation don't go well. But the ratio of genuine forward movement to time spent waiting is, across any extended period, considerably more favorable than the permission-first approach produces. Epictetus put it plainly: make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. The self-taught man lives this without labeling it. His forward motion comes entirely from inside, and that makes him genuinely difficult to stop. Number 6. History's most dangerous men were never the most schooled ones. Think about the people who actually changed things, not the ones who managed existing systems competently, but the ones who broke old frameworks entirely and built something new in their place. Think about how many of them arrived through the standard approved path, and how many built what they built precisely because they weren't fully operating inside the system everyone else was navigating. This isn't a dismissal of formal education's considerable contributions to human progress. It's an observation about a specific pattern that repeats across disciplines and centuries. The people who produce genuinely disruptive contributions, the ones who don't improve existing models but replace them, tend to have developed in ways formal training was never quite designed to produce. Benjamin Franklin received almost no formal education past childhood. He taught himself printing, writing, science, and diplomacy through relentless self-direction and constant experimentation. Abraham Lincoln's formal schooling, by his own accounting, amounted to less than a year in total. He became a lawyer, then a president, through the same method: reading obsessively, thinking carefully, testing conclusions against real situations. Frederick Douglass, born into a system specifically designed to deny him every possible form of education, secretly taught himself to read, then to write, then to speak publicly, and eventually dismantled arguments made by formally credentialed men who had every institutional advantage he was denied. What these men shared wasn't the absence of formal education in the romanticized sense. What they shared was the capacity to think beyond available frameworks because they never fully inhabited those frameworks to begin with. David Hume observed that a wise man proportions his belief to the evidence, and what's applicable here is his emphasis on treating received wisdom as something to be evaluated rather than simply absorbed. The self-taught man operates by something structurally similar. He distrusts knowledge he hasn't tested in some form, and he traces what he knows back to the actual experience of learning it, rather than simply having been told it. Genuinely new things consistently come from people who weren't fully immersed in how things were previously done. They are the most difficult to predict, the most difficult to contain, and the most difficult to defeat, because they never learned to operate within the boundaries that everyone else unconsciously accepted as the actual limits of the possible. They are, in the truest sense, one in a million, not by accident, by the slow, unglamorous, profoundly necessary process of building themselves from the ground up. Conclusion. 6 reasons, each one pointing at the same underlying truth from a different angle. That the process of building yourself, without permission, without a safety net, without anyone grading the process, produces something that cannot be precisely replicated through any other means. The self-taught man is rare. Not because self-teaching is impossible, but because most people who could do it spend their time waiting for a system to do it for them. The ones who stop waiting, who start building, who push through confusion and failure and long invisible stretches of progress, become, over time, genuinely difficult to stop. You already know which of these 6 describes something you've lived. You felt it while you were reading. Drop it in the comments, one honest sentence about something you built for yourself that nobody handed you. Someone reading it right now is still deciding whether to start. Your one line might be what moves them. Like this video. Share it with someone still waiting for permission. And subscribe, because what's coming next builds directly on this.